Welcome to the Teep Show, a show for UFC veterans and, well, casuals alike, where we break down the latest fights and comings and goings in the MMA world. This is a special addendum to episode 2, giving the heartbreaking news that Khamzat Chimaev, the 13-0 wrecking ball, has pulled out of yet another fight. This time, it's for Saturday's number one contender fight against Robert the Reaper Whittaker, a friend of the show. This is sad for the UFC fandom for many reasons. We finally were going to see Khamzat face a real 185-pounder, one of the best of them at that. We don't see Khamzat fight very often. He pulls out of a lot of fights or misses weight for them. So in his stead, Khamzat will be replaced by Whittaker-Aliskerov. Ikram is 15-1. I'll let you guess who that one loss is to. That's right. It's none other than Khamzat Chimaev himself. Little background, Ikram is a Dagestani that is a little bit more like Islam Makhachev than the Khamzat Khabib mold. He likes to stand and trade, stay standing as a primary stance, and mix in very good wrestling. Although we haven't seen much of that in his UFC career, that's been his career back home in Europe. Now, this fight is very important for bettors. Robert Whittaker is currently somewhere in the neighborhood of minus 140 for this fight. We cover Rob later in the pod. His resume has been well discussed in general with those wins over Prime, Jacare, Yoel twice, Paulo Costa, Marvin Vettori. So let's talk about Ikram. Dana White, in announcing this change, mentioned that no one in the top 15 wants to fight Ikram. That may be true. That may be the reason he only has 2 fights in the UFC, wins over Phil Hawes and Warlley Alves. Both of these were first-round knockouts for Ikram. Taking a look at the Phil Hawes fight, and Phil in general, Phil has quality wins against Nasruddin Imavov, and, well, that's kind of it. He's chinny. He has losses to Roman Dolidze, Bruno Ferreira, and Chris Curtis on the resume. In the fight, that doesn't really stop Hawes from standing with Ikram and actually outlanding Ikram early. He hurts him with the lead right hook about 90 seconds in, lands with the hook again after that, throws a couple of hard body kicks in there. Phil's actually winning the first round before Ikram slumps him with a 1-2 down the pipe. It's not often that a first-round knockout is a bad look, but this guy, Ikram, is supposed to be a slight underdog against one of the best in the world in Robert Whittaker. We go to the Warlley Alves fight. Ikram's able to move forward and walk Alves down without much resistance, and he gets an early knockout. And do you know why that's possible? Alves has lost 5 of his last 6. This was his first fight at middleweight. Simply put, Alves is not even remotely close to being a ranked middleweight, and then there are many levels above that before we get to Robert Whittaker. The path to win for Ikram is landing heavily on the somewhat chinny Whittaker, but that's the only path to victory, it seems. Getting Whittaker at minus 140 is an unbelievable play. He went through a Khamzat-style training camp, which means he's been drilling takedown defense, takedown defense, takedown defense. Aliskerov won't be able to get this to the ground, and Robert has a massive experience edge in the fight and in the striking department. He also plainly has a massive edge in the striking department. If you're getting outpointed by Phil Hawes like Ikram was, you have some problems. And so Ikram will on Saturday. Parlay this with Sergey Pavlovich at minus 190, a man whose opponent is on record saying how Pavlovich beats him in training for a plus 160 parlay. And you're looking at a sweet, sweet play for your Saturday night. Now, on to the main show. Welcome to the Teep Show, a UFC show for veterans and, well, casuals alike, where we preview and recap fights and break down the latest comings and goings in the UFC. I'm Alex. That man to my side is Jonah, or J-Man. And we're breaking down what is arguably the best non-pay-per-view card the UFC is offering to us humble peasants. Fight Night Riyadh. Of course, Saudi Arabia is offering several wheelbarrows of cash for the UFC to put this on, so Dana's still happy. Probably considers himself a genius for making this happen on a Fight Night card. That's all to say, rest in peace, Jamal Khashoggi. The joke's on the guys paying golfers hundreds of millions to play in Saudi Arabia. All right, we don't do politics, just angry introductions, so let's get into it. We're breaking down the biggest fights in Riyadh, but first we're recapping the week that was in UFC land. Jonah, we recorded a podcast. Do you remember?
I do. I was on it.
We saved UFC 303 because Conor McGregor was supposed to be maybe kind of injured.
Gray area, but yes.
And then Mike Chandler, bless his swollen heart, went on someone else's podcast and said it's all good. And we look like idiots. And I'm turning this over to you. What the hell is going
on? Based on Ariel's tweet today, and for the viewers' info, paraphrasing, sounds like the UFC is still putting feelers out to replace that main event on 303 for whatever reason. Although it does sound like it's likely a McGregor injury that nobody's leaking details on.
It sounds like a nagging injury or something that is getting worse.
Right. The word worse was used today in Ariel's tweet, which is maybe that wasn't the case last week. Like there was optimism that, if a few days went by, we'll see what the status is. But it doesn't sound good, for lack of a better word. So I think like we discussed last week and like we were just discussing offline, Pereira at 205 seems to be the only savior, especially considering this is International Fight Week and you can't really look silly going up against other promotions or fights at all in any sport. So absolutely. I don't think they have any other option but to break the bank for Pereira and Yuri.
There's one other option that you and I have discussed offline, and that's Max stepping in on the BMF. And again, it would take a boatload of money. Which one would you rather see? All things the same.
Probably Pereira Yuri. It would definitely be exciting to see Max kind of, especially with his stock being so high right now after 300. And I actually think he matches up pretty well against Chandler. But I think I'd rather see that 205 title defended so that we can get Pereira Ankalaev by the end of the year. If Pereira beats Yuri this time, who even knows? I'd still put that fight at a pick'em the next matchup. So, but to answer your question, I think I'd still rather see Pereira and Yuri than kind of this, like, again, the BMF is already sort of this made up thing that is kind of a facade, and to main event International Fight Week between Holloway and Chandler when we're not even sure which weight class Holloway's in, I wouldn't be that excited for that.
And it'd be Holloway not only going up to 55, which he did for the BMF against Gaethje, but all of a sudden going up to 70, right? It would look like a swollen guy against a shell of a human.
That's a good point. I don't know if maybe because we said they're putting feelers out for a new fight and replacements for McGregor. I wonder if the people they're reaching out to are 55ers or 70s, because I would imagine, just based on this short of a notice, I don't think Chandler was planning on cutting to 155. Like, I don't think he would have time to do that. No, absolutely not. But then, do you have him fighting an actual welterweight at 170? Because then he's going to be completely outsized. And it would need to be a big name. And that fight doesn't do anything. Or like you said, Holloway, a featherweight, fighting for the BMF at 170.
At 70.
That makes no sense.
I was going to say, I know a guy that would be down, and his name's Vicente Luque, and just no one wants to see that go on.
Main eventing international fight.
International Fight Week. That's right. That's right. But let's talk about, we have a really interesting, we had actually a good fight night. We gave a lot of stick to the fight nights, to the non-pay-per-views, but we had a good Louisville fight night. Good card. And I'll say first off, and I don't want to hear anything else about the fight, Raul Rosas continues to be the strangest looking human to ever stepped in an octagon. I mean, I have stronger words than that, but this is a family show. He's 3-1 in the UFC now at 19. That's crazy impressive.
It is. He gets a lot of shit because of the Christian Rodriguez fight, which, granted, wasn't pretty, but when you're that young and you're winning in the UFC at all, that's impressive.
Crazy impressive.
I mean, he's on a good road, so I got no hate for that guy.
It's fuck the competition. Yeah. I mean, again, 3-1 in the UFC at 19. Yeah. He's going to get Paddy treatment, and he deserves it. And to that, what I mean is hand-selected fights that he can win. My question to you, Jonah, how many more cans can you feed Rosas before you have to give him
I'd say, so they've fed Paddy 5 cans to date, and I think you can feed Rosas even more than that, being that he's 19 years old right now. Like, why in the world shouldn't he fight 8 unranked guys his next 8 fights? There's no rush. If he fights twice a year for the next 4 years against cans in the UFC, by the way, nobody in the UFC is really a can. Like, that's good experience regardless.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. Even with the Terrence Mitchell fight, he was signed on short notice, but Terrence Mitchell was the best of that regional promotion.
So there's no cans in the UFC. It's the best experience you're going to get. So if he fights twice a year for 4 years, you're looking at 23 years old. That's still like 5 years younger than most guys when they even get into the UFC. Like, he should be in absolutely no rush to fight anybody that good. And the longer time passes and people see him submitting guys in round 1 or 2, even if they're not great competition, we'll build a brand that they can sell to people. And he's Mexican, so it helps when you've got events like the Sphere on Mexican Independence Day. Like, you can legit headline UFC Mexico cards with that kid in a few years. So I mean, there's just no rush with that kid. He obviously. He would get his ass beat by any ranked bantamweight right now. But that's because he's 19 years old and isn't that experienced. Like, he's got plenty of time to grow.
Absolutely. And Pedro Munoz will be there in 2026 with the 14 ranking if need be. No, impressive finish. I did love the Tercios fuck you to start the fight.
Well, that's all Tercios can do, really, to entertain people, because his fights are. I mean, it's funny because he won the Ultimate Fighter and he's looked like complete shit since then.
Did he win the Ultimate Fighter?
He won the season with Volkan Ortega, and people. And he actually, I forget who it was, but he actually beat the top bantamweight prospect on the show. That was kind of considered the upset of the season. People thought this kid was legit, and he's lost 2 in a row now against unranked guys, and it was obviously just used as a feeder, this fight for Rosas. So I don't know. That guy probably will get cut after his next loss.
All right, the main event, we'll get to it. Obviously, there was a lot of controversy in the Cannonier Imavov stoppage. I'm in the distinct minority of people who had no problem with the stoppage. But I also had money on it. So that explains why I was okay. Now, look, Jared has the right to eat 15 more punches. And I don't even say that disrespectfully. He has the right to eat some more and try to rebound. I just don't think it was gonna happen. He was wobbling bad before, man. I mean, look, I've only seen once before someone run like that in the cage away from the opponent who they signed a contract to fight. It was only in a woman's fight, I'm trying to remember the name, but the literal running away.
Ronda Rousey. The Ronda Rousey running away is all time. Yeah. I mean, that's what you're thinking about.
So, no, I'm thinking about a girl that literally ran against the cage. I'll put it in the comments or something. But, look, a lot of people had a problem with the stoppage because Jared seemed to be okay after the fight was stopped.
Yeah, it was too early. That's why. I mean, you're to your point. It was not looking good for him, and easily could have ended like 15 seconds later with Imavov knocking him out. But he was fine because it was way too early. I mean, I think Herzog even knows that he didn't give him enough of a chance. Like, you can't take a guy. There's very, very few times where it's okay to stop a fight when both are still on their feet. I can think of like a couple off the top of my head. The first one being Gaethje, Tony Ferguson. Like it was kind of hard to keep watching that over and over.
He's shaking his head.
Yeah. But that was too early. Like Cannonier was complete. I mean, he was hurt, but he was still there. Like, and if anybody's still there at all, you can't stop the fight like that. But that being said, like I'm not that upset about it, just in terms of like how it impacts the division and the result, because if Imavov won that round, which obviously he most likely would have, unless he completely gassed or whatever, then it probably would have been 2-2 going into the fifth with a really hurt Jared, and Imavov was looking better as the fight went along. So I'm not look, yes, it was a bad stoppage. I'm glad Herzog kind of just like took accountability for it. But at the end of the day, like it's not like Jared was up 3-0 dominating and this robbed him of a definite victory. I would have said at the moment in time, given how hurt he was, that Imavov was most likely going to win that fight anyways. So it's kind of like when Weidman won his last fight and Herb pulled him off the guy when he didn't tap or whatever. Like Weidman had won 2.5 rounds. It's not like it would have changed the result. It's not a big deal. Right. Like if it's not changing the result, I don't really care. So, and frankly, Cannonier's 40 and not going to beat any of the top guys. Like I could care less.
Well, I think that's what stupid MMA, Twitter, and social media is getting upset about, that this is Cannonier's last shot. You and I know that Cannonier didn't deserve his only shot.
Sure.
Against Izzy.
They just had no fresh matchups for him.
Correct.
Yeah.
And Izzy asked for it and got it because it was an easy guy to win. Cannonier is 40. Guess what? He had plenty of time to make his mark in the title conversation. Guess what? He didn't do it. I mean, his only really dominant performance in his lifetime, I think, for me, is against Vettori. I've told you this offline.
Yeah,
and
his
best performance was against the guy post-title shot, and he didn't deserve it beforehand. The biggest issue with this fight and this stoppage to me isn't the early stoppage. It's the fight. It's the fact that Imavov is now the number 4 middleweight in the world.
Right.
And he has no business being anywhere close to that. I mean, we just shit on Paulo Costa the whole week last week. The whole week we shit on him. Who are you taking in Costa and Imavov?
Probably Imavov. But to your point, the gap between the top 4 ranked 4 middleweights in the world, including the champion, and Khamzat, we'll throw Khamzat in there, versus 4 and below is a significant. I mean, the drop is steep.
Okay, so here's my next guys that would beat Imavov. Champion 1 through 3. I think Marvin Vettori beats him. Honestly, I think the pressure. Look, the only guy with the worst. No, look, the only guy with the worst gas tank.
Maybe
the only guy with the worst gas tank in top 10 right now than Imavov is Paulo Costa. That's the only one.
I don't even know if Costa has a worse gas tank than Imavov.
Imavov's gas tank, dude, it was brutal. I mean, he threw some 1-2s down the pipe, and Cannonier is sitting in his corner receiving instruction. Imavov has got both hands on the fence.
Round 1.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I'm not going to get there and say Vettori wins a striking battle against a good striker. But to your point,
he wrestles. He wrestles. No, he doesn't wrestle.
He tries to wrestle. He'll maybe Vettori would hold him up against the fence for 25 minutes. That's a possible route to victory.
That's all you can ask for.
I think they should make Imavov Vettori in France. Because Vettori, he's already fought in France too. The Whittaker fight was in France, and Italian fans will make their way over, and it's an easy fight to build Imavov, and he doesn't really have a fight. I mean, it literally to the extent where the idea of fighting Cannonier again was floated this week because there's just no fights for him. Like, you're not going to get the
There's one fight for him.
Who's that?
One fight for him.
That's Paulo Costa.
And I want Costa to beat up Dolidze before he gets
Listen to me. Imavov and Costa have the worst 2 gas tanks in the top 10. Guess what? Advantage Costa. I was just shitting on this guy. I completely swore off this guy literally a week ago.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Look, it's been 10 days, and I'm already back into Costa.
No need. Let's let him beat up a shitty grappler first before we start facing him against top 5 opponents again. Like, I need to see him beat up scrubs before we give him good fighters again. And I'm not even saying Imavov is out of his class or anything, but it's better when Costa's relevant as like this like destroyer guy that walks people down rather than putting him in like the title picture, because he's never going to win the title. So like, let's get some entertainment out of him first.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
The co-main event. Do you want to talk about Dom Reyes?
No.
Great. I don't either.
Match him up against Anthony Smith, and then if he wins that fight, then we can talk. But, I'm happy for him. Beating Dustin Jacoby doesn't really do much. I mean, he was talking like he was back in the title picture after a Dustin Jacoby win.
Well, all glory to God, of course.
Right. But him and Anthony Smith have some history. Just make the fight. I know Anthony Smith thinks he gets a title shot off of an unranked guy, but I think I'd rather see Smith and Dom Reyes next. And then the winner of that can be relevant again to an extent.
Here's my problem with Dom Reyes, okay? Yeah, okay, sure. He should have beat, could have beat, would have beat John Jones. You know the funny thing about guys and teams who almost win a championship and then they don't? The longer we get from the event, the less anyone cares.
Right.
Correctly. The less anyone should care. Dom got sparked by Jan, Yuri, and somebody else in short succession. Who was the third? You remember?
Ryan Spann. We were at that fight.
Well, okay, yeah. So that's what I was going to say. The one that's irredeemable is getting sparked by a Ryan Spann jab. Yeah. He's gone, man. He's gone. Let him be. Let him fight, but he can't ever co-main again unless it's on the upcoming Alex Perez Fight Night. I mean, in which case
he can main event.
Yeah, he can main event. Right. Good Lord, that's a brutal card. But I mean, he's not even ranked. It's kind of a shame, honestly, that he was co-main.
He's ranked 13 now. Dom Reyes.
Is he?
Yeah, that's why. I mean, one fight win streak, ranked 13, and he's like, "I'm back in the title picture, baby."
Do you remember watching Ryan Spann just jab him straight?
Yeah,
and
he was. Crumpled? It was the worst defensive striking performance I've seen in my life.
And you hate Ryan Spann.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. I mean, he's not very good. But,
right. Exactly.
But man, that was scary.
Jonah, Bruno Ferreira, spinning elbow.
Yeah.
Knockout of the year, 2024.
These like arbitrary conversations are hard to have when you say something like knockout of the year. That's like something they'd talk about on First Take. But, Gaethje Holloway.
You throwing shade on our podcast?
I am. Fuck our podcast. Gaethje Holloway was the most like memorable high stakes knockout that everybody will like have in their heads forever. Like I can watch that in my head over and over again. But just in terms of like how impressive and crazy the skill that was necessary to complete the knockout was, the Bruno Ferreira knockout was the knockout of the year. Like for instance, if that methodology of knockout was used in the Gaethje Holloway fight, we'd be talking about it 100 times more than we already are in that knockout. You know what I mean? So it's always cool to see a spinning elbow, but this was
the second of the fight. The second of the fight as well. And look, you're absolutely right. Max Gaethje is knockout of the year until further notice. This was fantastic. This was a top 100 UFC knockout of all time. Is it this year's? No. In a bad year, could it be knockout of the year?
It's just it's hard to say that it is when it's just such low stakes. Like Bruno Ferreira looked like shit, and Dustin Stoltzfus is not a good fighter. So I could care less about meaningless middleweights using poor defense to not defend a spinning elbow. There's a reason it doesn't happen often.
Shout out Kevin Holland from our last week's conversation. Real big news. Claudio Prates smoked cigs.
I saw. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll take this one.
Gangster.
Awesome. I mean, I think people, and he even made this point that people view him as an athlete, not a fighter. Now, he's wrong there. He is an athlete for sure. But people don't understand what I mean, if you go to a Muay Thai camp in Thailand, they're smoking cigs before the fight,
right.
And they're technically more impressive than anyone not named Rafael Fiziev.
Sure.
You know, smoking cigs before the fight is not going to kill you. If it gives you that boost, absolutely.
Use it as a marketing tool. He should get sponsored by Marlboro next fight.
American Spirit.
And shout it out on the mic. I mean, this is how you get clicks and you get paid more. So I don't see why not. That's like the one thing anybody knows about the guy now.
Yeah, he smokes cigs.
Yeah.
And again, like it's not going to do your cardio enough in a fight. It's just not. I've smoked cigs before Muay Thai training. I'm not saying that I'm at that level, but it's just not going to be the thing, you know, that differentiates you. So if that's what it – and they grow up smoking cigs before they fight.
Right. At 9 years old. Yeah.
At 9 years old, they're smoking cigs before they fight. Exactly. The last real thing we have to talk about is Ludovic Klein.
I've been on the Ludovic Klein train.
You have been on the Ludovic Klein. Do you want to take it away? You've been on the Ludovic Klein train.
You know why? It's because a few years ago, I watched his fight against Mike Trizano, who is no longer even in the UFC.
That's a deep cut, John.
Yeah, and he lost a unanimous decision to Mike Trizano, and it's again, this goes back to our conversation of what's like if we were to talk about what's the worst scorecard in UFC history. No one would say Ludovic Klein versus Mike Trizano because no one gives a shit about that fight. But man, it was maybe the worst scorecard I've ever seen to give Trizano a unanimous decision because Klein probably won 3-0. And since then, he's been really fucking good, and nobody seems to pay any attention. And he's only 29 years old, too. Like, I actually think he's like a borderline ranked caliber guy. And to beat Moises handily is pretty impressive. And a lot of people thought Ignacio Bahamondes, when he fought him, I think Bahamondes was like a 3-handle or something like that, because people talk about Bahamondes striking in camp and say this guy's going to be a wizard one day. And Klein beat his fucking ass. Like, yeah. I think, and Klein, again, guy's only 29 years old. I think, I'm not going to go as far as to say he's a title challenger one day, but top 10, top 15, 100%.
This is what I'll say about beating Thiago Moises. Moises is a tough-ass customer. He's not a gatekeeper because he's not ranked, but really he's a barometer if a guy should be ranked. They was BSD's ticket, Benoit Saint-Denis' ticket into the rankings, if you remember. So maybe call him a rankings gatekeeper. But Klein looked good, man. He looked quick.
6-fight unbeaten streak now. Hasn't lost in almost 3 years. Ludovic Klein should fight to be in the rankings his next fight, I think.
No, absolutely. And that was going to be my question to you is Bobby Green versus Ludovic Klein. Who do you have?
That's tough because Ludovic's really good at boxing too. So that boxing matchup, that's maybe like that
kick is fast, but man, he's a good boxer as well.
That's maybe the best, just pure. Given that Poirier's retired, probably that's probably the best pure boxing match you can make, at least in the lightweight division. Yeah. So I'd love to see it. I mean, I'd literally throw the odds at a pick'em. That's how good both guys are. But I'd probably lean Klein just because I think he's more well-rounded than Bobby.
Right. He's going to have the boxing. He's not going to be as good boxing as Bobby, but he's going to have the kick advantage for sure.
He'll have advantage everywhere, actually.
Right.
Outside of boxing.
Yeah, no, look. And can we talk about his ceiling?
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I don't think he'd get past. I mean, like, obviously striking is his biggest strength.
For sure.
And so you look at guys that are ranked like top 5, top 10 that are primarily strikers. Like I wouldn't go as far as to say he is as good at striking as Poirier, Gaethje, or Fiziev. So I don't think he can get ranked that high necessarily.
Yeah.
But he's like again. I'm gonna beat the drum again. He's 29. It's 29. He's really experienced for a 29-year-old. Like he's got over 20 wins in his career. So I think, year end, maybe mid 2025, you should see him in the rankings. Wouldn't be a bad fight against Jalen Turner next.
Well, why don't we give a quick 90 seconds on Jalen Turner? Why don't we slow talk Jalen Turner? Jonah and I think Jalen Turner is the best lightweight fighter that ever was. And the
2-fight losing streak.
On a 2-fight losing streak. And that Jalen Turner might be anybody that ever could be. But God bless, how does that boy make 55? It doesn't make
It might not happen again. He's really young too. Jalen's like 28. He might not be able to make weight for much longer.
Very young. Yeah. And might say, look, he just lost to Hanato, which you and I, did the teepee dance. Did the teepee dance over.
Pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, and I mean, for him, if the results aren't coming at 55, then why fucking make that weight? Doesn't make any sense. Right. So, we're gonna go to Jonah's favorite fighter, who's Aljamain Sterling. He said that the context here is. Aljo felt like he was pressured into a title fight against Sugar Sean O'Malley. He felt like he wasn't ready, but he took it anyway. And there was a UFC documentary that dropped recently, and they dropped that footage of Hunter Campbell?
Yep.
Hunter Campbell talking to Aljo, saying like, "Hey man, by the way, Dana's always said that there was maybe one guy that could take over the biz from him one day. I think that's pretty clear to you and I that that's Hunter Campbell."
What's funny? At the time, Dana said it's not Hunter Campbell. It's somebody that nobody even knows. But I think that actually just since this doc has released in the past week and people are literally Hunter Campbell stock
has come out well in this doc.
People love Hunter Campbell.
People really like Hunter Campbell. So the way that you see how he talked to Marab?
Yeah, right. So I think just, compared to when Dana said that, however many, it might have been a couple years ago now, to now, at post-documentary, when people see who this guy is and know how he operates, I think Hunter Campbell should probably be the guy.
Might be the guy.
And fighters love him. Fighters love Hunter Campbell.
Hunter Campbell.
Yeah, well, he's like a relationship manager.
Right. It seemed like Dana is like good cop, bad cop a little bit.
Right.
Or Dana's the bad cop.
Right.
You little pussy. You won't take this fight. And anyway, so Aljo said in relation to the clip of him and Hunter Campbell coming out, where Aljo ultimately accepted the fight without, and Jonah, you would agree, without much confrontation. He was like, "No, I'll take it." So this is what Aljo said. "I said I didn't know what he was talking about, that I had no desire to fight right now. That the whole thing I was saying, I have to heal up and see how my body holds up. I can sit out, but then you're also telling me, well, if you don't fight, then you don't fight for almost a year, and that's not cool either. So you almost tied my hands behind my back, but I took the path where I was like, you know what? If I'm going to roll the dice because my teammates and my managers are all pushing me to do it, I'm going to roll the dice." No,
I can't deal with this guy.
That might be me laughing at a guy that can whoop my ass. But that is Aljo speaking on the situation, kind of dredging up beef, I felt like, with UFC leadership after it seemed like they finally were on the same page. So, Jonah, I mean, what's going on with Aljo here, and what is his beef?
I don't agree with everything Dana says, but he did say that quote.
I'll say this for context.
Too. Yeah.
Jonah and Dana don't see eye to eye. Jonah is frequently on the opposite side of Dana. But
correct. But Dana said it, and the quote was used in the doc too. Was that Aljo just seems to get in his own way all the time, and I actually sympathize with him to the extent where I believe that the UFC were quote unquote forcing his hand to fight as soon as possible, because they wanted to make that fight against Sean in Boston. But and Hunter even said it, and I know it's sort of comes with consequences if you don't take it, but you're still the champ if you don't take it. No one is holding a gun to your head to fight. Don't fight if all you're going to do is bitch about how you don't want to fight. That's why the guy has no fans anymore, by the way. No, I shouldn't say anymore, because he literally never did. He never did. So
never had a fan.
But he's if he had any, he'd be losing them now, because no one just wants to hear this constant bitching about how he never wants to fight and then is forced to fight as a UFC fighter. He fought twice last year. He's acting like he's being forced to do things outside of the standards of what being a UFC fighter entails. Fighting twice a year as a fucking champion, and you're bitching the same thing again this year. He's he fought on UFC 300 against Kattar, right? And made the call out about Evloev. Great.
And what happened?
Playing good guy. And then this is my least favorite term he uses. He gets on his fucking podcast, not even with anyone. He's just by himself looking straight into the camera, and he's
I mentioned that I have a better podcast setup than
you do.
Yeah.
I want to, what's wrong with enjoying the fruits of my labor? I have a life outside of fighting. Brother, you're fighting twice a year. Look, I get it. I'm not saying if he was right next to me right now, he would be like, you don't understand how hard being a UFC fighter is, man. It's so hard on your body and your mind. And I fully believe you. But guess what? Every other fucking UFC fighter is doing that. You don't just get to. Right. You don't have some privilege that makes you not have to, perform to the standards of what being a UFC fighter entails. This fucking guy, man. I hope he doesn't get a title shot. I don't care if he wins his next 5 fights at featherweight. This is the worst guy to have as champion, and that's why they did everything they could to try to get him the fuck out of there.
God bless that we have the opportunity to move on to UFC Riyadh, where we have a question, and that question is, who's on the clock? Whose career needs this win more than any other? Whose career really rests on
Rob by a mile. By a mile.
I know. Go ahead. Hey, go ahead. Rob who? Rob who, John?
Whittaker. You know that. I know he's one of our favorite fighters. But, if you lose this, then you've lost to Izzy, Dricus, and Khamzat. So those aren't fresh matchups at the top of the division. And you're not on a winning streak anymore. And, honestly, he's probably not as big of a draw as any of those guys at the top. So he needs this bad.
He needs this bad. He doesn't need this as bad as another fighter on the card.
Whose
name is Kelvin Gastelum. Kelvin Gastelum took part in one of the best fights in UFC history against Israel Adesanya in an interim middleweight championship, which, by the way, was an interim because Rob was hurt. And now, look, I'm going to go full discretion. Rob is my favorite fighter in the UFC. But
right.
Kelvin came up and he got the immediate title
Well,
shot.
the stakes for this fight with Kelvin aren't nearly as high as Rob's fight with Khamzat. Rob's fight with Khamzat is a legit #1 contender. Kelvin's fight, Kelvin should beat the shit out of Daniel Rodriguez, all things considered.
That is your biggest point, and let me tell you why you're wrong. Your biggest point is he should beat the shit out of D-Rod, and we'll get to that preview. I don't want to spend too much time on it. But Kelvin took all of our expectation at 85. He really fought Izzy closer than he's ever been fought. I mean, Izzy's been knocked out, but closer than Izzy's ever been fought.
Aside from Sean walking him down for 25 minutes.
Sean wasn't close, brother. Yeah, that wasn't even close. Kelvin, with all respect, is a fat boy at 85. He's always been a fat boy at 85, like Darren Till. I mean, when you have guys, high-level athletes that are willing to push their bodies to the absolute limit to make a weight limit, especially 45 to 55 is how many pounds? You do the math. It's 10, right? But when you go 70 to 85, those extra 5 pounds are fucking massive. So Kelvin acquitted himself well, obviously, in his first 85 bout. I actually don't know if it's his first 85 bout, but he acquitted himself well in the 85 interim title shot. When he dropped down to 170, after losing a bunch at 85, it's a top-level guys, to be fair. He lost to Rob. But when he dropped down to 70, that was what everyone expected him to be at. And it was the weight he was early in his career when he was knocking out guys left and right.
Sure.
Really impressive. When he goes down to 170 and he gets ragdolled by Sean Brady.
Yeah, in hindsight, it was probably a bad matchup to make.
Yeah, you think?
It's funny because at the time the odds were like even because Gastelum was coming off a really good performance at 85, and Brady was coming off a loss against Bilal. And
yeah, sure.
I don't think people know how good Brady is yet, and they definitely didn't before the Gastelum fight. Like, just when you hear stories out of Brady's camp, it sounds like the guy's a world beater that just hasn't had the opportunity to showcase it.
Out of a small camp, to be fair,
right,
but yes.
Right,
yeah.
But it sounds like he would contend with anybody at 170. Go ahead.
But Gastelum dropping from 85, usually you'd expect the guy dropping from 85 to have the strength advantage.
Yeah, but
and he got ragdolled.
Brady's Brady's probably the best
shades
grappler.
Of Ilya Bryce, really.
Yeah. I think Brady's the best grappler at 70. And Kelvin has some wrestling, but he's primarily a striker. And he looked like a fool against Brady.
He looked
both on the ground and striking, by the way.
So this is why I say Kelvin's on the clock, because he's the 170 experiment. And if he loses to D-Rod, the UFC career is over. I mean, it is.
Yeah, money fight.
For Rob, he can be a gatekeeper, but if Kelvin loses to D-Rod, it is over at 70. And if it's over at 70, then he's fighting guys like Nicholas Dalby, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. It gets really dicey really quick. So, like Dominic Reyes, who, thank God, we didn't talk about, Gastelum had a great performance in the championship fight. And actually, I mean, look, maybe me more so than you, but offline, we were very high on Gastelum's 70 prospects. And the fact that I
thought certain matchups he could win in that were ranked.
Yeah, the fact that he went so badly against Brady, it's got to go very well against D-Rod.
Sure.
I mean, and again, we'll get to that. We won't talk too much on this, but it's got to go very well against D-Rod, or else, brother, Rizin looks pretty fucking sexy.
I think I don't even disagree with everything you're saying, but I think just the drop from Rob being a title contender to a top 5 gatekeeper is more of a drop than Kelvin would take should he lose the D-Rod fight.
Well, why don't we go straight then into our previews?
Let's do it.
Of the UFC Riyadh fight. And the first fight on the card, J-Man, is who?
Main card?
Main card.
Renat versus Dalby.
Sorry. Who's the number 1 fight on the card?
Rob and Khamzat, obviously.
Rob and Khamzat. That's right. We're gonna go straight into it. We're gonna go from the top down.
Okay.
This is for listeners back home. This is my favorite fighter, Rob Whittaker. Second to none. I love the guy. I've commented on his Insta. Let me babysit your kids. I mean, not cool stuff.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Here we go.
I edit that one out.
If you want to get off the podcast, this is your time. But he's fighting Khamzat, 13-0. 13-0. Oh, it's a big O. Khamzat obviously has been, if you haven't been listening, has been the scariest guy in the welterweight division first, scariest undefeated guy, and then the scariest guy in the middleweight division. And he's run through absolutely everyone he's faced except Gilbert Burns, who he soundly
and Usman.
I mean,
the Usman fight was tight.
Some people think it was tighter than I do. But
I agree with that. I don't think it warranted a draw or anything like that.
No.
Khamzat clearly won. And he broke his hand in the first round. People seem to just throw that back out the door. Yeah.
People forget that. So why don't you break this down for us? We got Whittaker, Khamzat. Rob Whittaker, can you sing a little prelude to Rob Whittaker's achievements so far? Because people seem to forget.
I mean, this guy's a champ. Like, people forget because he's so young, and this hasn't been the case for a few years now, like since COVID. But Whittaker was champ, dude. Like, that guy was the best in the world at one point. And you and I would even argue that he maybe still is. Whether results indicate that, that's a fair point. But, I think on any given day, Whittaker could definitely beat anybody. And in this, man, I'm trying to not let my bias get in the way of picking this. But, I mean, look, if you watch both guys fight, I think the takeaway should be if Khamzat can't win in the first round via strangulation, then you got to favor Rob after round one. Because if Khamzat gasses out and then it becomes a striking fight where takedowns can't come as easy and they're not as dry, whatever, then and Rob's takedown defense is very good, obviously. Then I think if you're you could be looking at like a dominant 5-round decision win for Rob. But obviously, and odds would indicate this, by the way, out of Vegas, Khamzat winning any fight within 2 minutes seems to be more likely than not.
Yeah.
But the only thing I'll say about that is that the secret's kind of out of the bag now. Like, if you know what you're up against going into a fight like that, I mean, Rob's just got to be training and he said it. He said it on his pod. He's kind of saying this has been the most difficult training camp he's ever been through just because of the amount of pure wrestling is so difficult. But if you know you're up against that and you're as good at takedown defense as Whittaker, I would, again, trying to erase bias, I would lean towards being able to survive round one, even if he doesn't win round one, just surviving, and making his way into later rounds where definitely come like round 3, I would definitely favor Whittaker. If you told me now the fight is going to enter round 3, I think I'd take Whittaker. Exactly.
Minus 350.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right. Great point.
Right. Yeah. We saw Khamzat against Gilbert deliver what's my favorite fight of all time, which was his first fight against a guy that could stuff takedowns a little bit.
And it's just scary to be on the ground with if you can get him there.
For sure. Khamzat took down Usman with ease in round 1.
Yeah.
And Usman kind of made the next 2 a draw. But the first round there's no doubt that Khamzat was getting the guy on the ground. So that's
Usman too. Usman.
To Usman.
Yeah, doing that to Usman
too. I mean, All-American wrestler, one of the best wrestlers in UFC history, probably.
Doesn't get taken down. Like, that's not a thing with Usman. Unless Leon trips him by fluke.
Yeah. I think it was his second takedown of all time, maybe.
Yeah.
Because Usman has that perfect
Colby
record.
would get him down for like 2 seconds at a time in their matches, but not really.
All-American. And when you look at Rob, you look at a guy who for me and for many was the boogeyman, which is Yo Romero, and he beat him twice.
Sure.
He did that at a time when no one was even willing to fight Yo Romero. I mean, when Yo Romero punched Tim Kennedy's lights out, it was like no one really wanted to be there at 85. Whittaker did it twice. Yo didn't even make weight once.
Yeah.
And Whittaker still.
I think equally as impressive that we're going back to pre-COVID UFC, so any veterans listening to this would know, was when he fought Jacare, when Jacare was probably the biggest boogeyman in the UFC.
Yeah,
and the only reason Jacare never even got a belt was because no one wanted to fight him. I mean, he's like a fucking 30th degree black belt in jiu-jitsu and was 35 years old, probably juiced at the time, and was dominating guys. And Whittaker beat him. Whittaker was like a two-handle underdog in that fight and beat him up. Yeah. So I think this isn't that much different just in terms of ground threat that Khamzat is. But Khamzat definitely is kind of like a fire out of the cannon type of guy that could win the fight in 2 minutes.
I think the differential in this fight is what Khamzat looks like at 85. I mean, we saw him at 85 against
He looks fucking big right now.
He looks big. He looks sauce.
Coming out. Dude,
he looks sauce.
Big as fuck. Like, even big for a middleweight now. I don't know how that guy ever made 170.
Well, you said that about Strickland, too.
Yeah, but Strickland at least has filled out over the years. Khamzat was making 170 like kind of recently in life. Yeah. Right, and then that fuck against that Nate fight. Like that guy didn't even try to make weight. 178 and a half. Like, you're going to get booed in America the rest of your life.
That's when the only cool moment Bilal had in his life when he was like, I can make 179.8. No, look, all right, so this is huge, and we haven't spent enough time talking about the landscape of the division, so it seems to be, unfortunately, J-Man thinks it. I'm on the outside, but J-Man thinks it. Brett Okamoto from ESPN thinks that Izzy is going to fight DDP next for the middleweight title.
It sounds nearly confirmed. Dan Hooker said today in an interview that him, Izzy, and Kai Kara-France are fighting on UFC.
All fighting on Perth.
All fighting on Perth.
And when is that?
That's in August. That's the August pay-per-view. And so, there's nobody Izzy would fight that's not Dricus. And Dricus has said he's already signed the contract for that fight. So, it sounds like a done deal that we're all just waiting for the announcement.
So this fight makes the number one contender to that UFC middleweight championship after.
Yeah.
And I think both J-Man and I would like to see Robert Whittaker pull it off. Real savage. We've tried to emphasize how much of a savage he is, but I think we haven't emphasized as much how much of a boogeyman Khamzat is. I mean, he went through 3 UFC fights, I think taking 2 significant strikes. Sub KO. The guy is a fucking savage. And there's ESPN articles and athletic articles about, his crazy Sweden gym mentality. So, J-Man, at the end of the day, you have the old guard versus the new. You have the fan favorite against the fan favorite.
Yeah. Khamzat is globally a fan favorite. I know he might get booed in America, but, man, he's a draw. Like, they were saying a few years ago, he's, like, on trajectory to be a McGregor-level draw.
So who do you have winning?
Rob.
All right, Rob, on to the next fight.
Just because I can't go against them. But I'll say this. If Khamzat...
What's the path?
I think survive a round and then I mean, 4-1 or 3-2 decision, I think.
So Robert is a little chinny. I hate to say it, but he's a little chinny.
I don't think Khamzat's going to stand.
I don't think Khamzat's going to stand. I think Khamzat's going to wrestle first round. And if Khamzat stands, then I like Whittaker being able to stand on the outside and doing the 1-2 down the pipe and a head kick after.
I'm surprised they made this fight because
I'm not.
I think it's the only matchup that Khamzat loses at the top. Like,
well, eventually he's got to fight like top of the top.
But he could fight top. They could make him Strickland. And they actually offered Strickland this fight, but he didn't want to go over to Abu Dhabi. But they could have made that somewhere else. They could have made Khamzat Izzy. They could have just given Khamzat the fight against Dricus and upset UFC fan base. I think he'd beat all those guys. I think Whittaker's his toughest fight in that division.
It is massive for people to understand the magnitude of this fight. And
it is.
Really,
it is.
Rob potentially being the best middleweight, probably the best middleweight in the world. And Khamzat being the boogeyman that no one wants to fight. They just move it up from 70.
Let me ask you this. If Khamzat goes out there and strangles Rob in 2 minutes, anybody in the division you're taking over Khamzat? I mean, like, he's got to be a minus 400
Sean
favorite.
Strickland.
Again, really? Still Sean? I agree that that's probably the second hardest matchup for him. But I would still take, especially when they've talked about their training together, and Khamzat apparently submitted him relatively easily.
Yeah.
I think I'd take Khamzat in that matchup.
Well, Khamzat's got that kind of Habib willing to shoot from way outside, from like long angles and just work it. I would take Sean because Sean's my answer. Who would you take against anybody? So I don't have a good matchup situation, but boy, I mean, if Khamzat strangles Rob, dude.
Yeah, it's scary. Scary to think about.
It's really scary.
If you can, because he might do it, by the way. But if you can do that against Rob, I mean, you could maybe do that to like top level light heavyweights, which is crazy. Because again, fighting at 170 not that long ago.
Yeah, he wanted to be a 3-division champ.
Right.
Right. To give my perspective, I think Rob stuffs takedowns. I think Rob stuffs takedown after takedown. I think Khamzat eventually gets in an advantageous position round 1. And I think Khamzat.
You think he gets the back?
Delivers ground and pound and gets back. And then I think Rob sweats out the round. And I think we grind out round 2. I think we grind out round 3. I actually think this is a 5-round decision.
Yeah. 3-2?
Maybe 4-1.
4-1?
Maybe 4-1.
Yeah, I think 4-1's more likely than 3-2 as well. Because I think Khamzat's going to... Thing is, I wonder if Khamzat is training to be more like patient at all, or if he knows too that that's his best chance to win is just in round 1.
To be fair to him, he gets a lot of chances in round 1. When he goes on his Berserker round 1 quest, he gets a lot of.
Because his chain wrestling and submissions are insane. Like that.
Crazy.
The Kevin Holland fight is the best demonstration of that. Like that takedown lasted 35 seconds, and they weren't just like up against the cage. Like that was a weird fucking scramble. That was actually impressive defensively from Holland. And then
for a bit, yeah.
And then his submissions are like top tier too. Like because he's just so strong that like any darce that he gets is in, even if it's not like perfect technically. So,
all right, so
I'm worried. As a Rob.
What's the Vegas line on this? Do you know?
I think right now it's sitting around Rob plus 200, Khamzat minus 250.
I'm ripping Rob.
Yeah, I get it.
Are you?
Yeah. No, of course not. But I'm not that confident.
You're not a good friend.
But I mean, I'll be rooting for our guy. I'll say that. I'm scared as a Rob fan.
Who are you taking to win the fight? You taking Khamzat?
Rob. I'm there.
But you won't take him plus 200?
No.
That's a man whose logic's not come full bear. Okay, so we have Sergey Pavlovich, one of my favorite heavyweights. That's such a nothing statement, by the way, because there's only 6 good heavyweights.
Them,
So, yeah, I'd say one of my favorite 2 heavyweights against Alexander Volkov. J-Man, take us off.
I've probably been the biggest Volkov supporter in the heavyweight division. I think Volkov is capable of beating anyone at heavyweight. That said, I don't know. It's hard to see anybody beating Pavlovich in a striking fight, considering the first punch he lands is going to put you out. And Volkov even touched on this in an interview recently where he was saying that every time they've trained together, like, Pav just puts him down easily. And so I don't know. I think
with strikes, I think.
Yeah, and so I think Volkov is probably going to look good for 2 minutes just because he's longer and like a better technical kickboxer. So maybe he could find a way to starch him in those 2 minutes, or maybe if he lands like a really big leg kick or a few of them, that would compromise Pav for the rest of the fight, then great. But most likely, it just ends with Pav putting him to sleep.
Volkov has frighteningly low knockout power for a heavyweight. It's hard to fathom how little heavyweight knockout. I mean, usually, at least in the top 15, there's 8 guys that can knock you out with a punch.
Yeah.
Volkov is not one of them. I remember big beef between you and me on the Derek Lewis-Alexander Volkov fight about how that went. And I kind of struggled to see how this goes any different. Not saying that it will be a Derek Lewis thing, but in terms of the one-punch knockout to end it, Volkov can land 15 great kicks, punches, strikes to the head even. And, you know, Pavlovich is a guy that you don't want landing once. So I don't see a world, and this is not Pavlovich. I don't know the odds, but this is Pavlovich.
I think Pavlovich is like a minus 200 favorite around there, which is fair.
I was going to say like 320. If he's anything under 300, I would massacre him.
I think he's around minus 200, which I think is a fair. That's Vegas showing respect to Volkov.
Who is Volkov beat of these big bunchers?
Well, Volkov's kind of been like a gatekeeper to the top 5 of,
for sure,
of heavyweight.
No doubt.
So
no doubt.
Yeah.
All right, Pavi. I have him minus 300. Apparently, he's minus 200. Go, Rip. Going back to our earlier conversation, Kelvin Gastelum versus D-Rod, Daniel Rodriguez. Now, my first thought of Daniel Rodriguez is a story that J-Man told about Alex Moreno on this podcast just one short week ago, where Alex Moreno, you know, he doesn't really win in the striking, doesn't really win in the grappling, but, you know, he gets out there in the cage and he can kind of do his thing. Yeah, that's not going to fucking work, I think, against Kelvin Gastelum. Kelvin Gastelum's a real guy.
Yeah.
I think he's a real guy. He's at 70 now. He was a real contender at 85. Again, you'd think normal convention is that a normal contender at 85 comes down to 70, and that's going to be a title contender. Based on the Brady fight, we don't know about that, but I will say this should be a fucking shellacking, Jonah.
It should be, and it's good matchmaking by them because who gives a shit about Daniel Rodriguez winning fights just in terms of the landscape of the division. I think Kelvin should probably body kick him to death because it's a big target. Daniel Rodriguez is probably 22% body fat at 170. And I actually like D-Rod. I think he's pretty tough, and he's a good, like, entering the rankings fight for guys that are coming up. But this should be easy work for Kelvin. He's much faster. It's not going to go to the ground. If it does, it'll be Kelvin's decision to take it to the ground. But Kelvin should win a pretty easy 3-0 decision here.
And if he doesn't, I guess what we're saying is it's a problem for Kelvin if it's not an easy decision.
Correct.
Because they've made him a nice bed for this fight.
Yeah.
And so if it's not an easy 3-0, or I mean,
he has the advantage.
A finish or a 3-0, it's not going to be good.
Agree.
For Kelvin's chances.
Agree.
My favorite, Johnny Walker Red against Volkan Ozdemir. I just want to start this analysis by saying Ozdemir was a very easy win in UFC 4, the video game, if you were defending it like
It's true. It's true.
Yeah, so there's that.
I've experienced that as well.
So I actually thought about Johnny Walker as the guy that had the most to lose, but I came off it. Same kind of situation as Kelvin. Needs a win here. Volkan was actually, I forgot, a title challenger.
Volkan's good, dude. Volkan was putting it on Yuri before he got sent to the Shadow Realm. But Volkan's not some sleeper. Like I think, I don't know, this fight's a little bit of a coin flip for me because Johnny, as exciting as some of his knockouts are and his personality and whatnot, like he really his best avenue to winning fights is like really boring point fighting and just leg kicking from the outside, kind of like he did against Anthony Smith. And if he does that, I think he should win just because he's longer and better technically. But he also has maybe the worst chin in the UFC, and Ozdemir's got serious power. So we could be looking at like an Ozdemir first round knockout as well.
Pick?
Gun to my head, Ozdemir.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. Upset
I think he's going to touch him. You?
Johnny. I mean, Johnny's really explosive.
Yeah.
I don't have much to say about it. Very explosive. I really like. I mean, he's got. If you study against him in UFC 4, then he's got good moves to study. But Volkan, you're right. Has been hot against Yuri.
Right.
I think Johnny put up a better fight against Anka than I would have expected.
Yeah, because Johnny kind of like was doing the weirdest shit he possibly could in round one of that fight. Because he had to. Like, you got to be like as unorthodox as possible if you're facing who's probably the best guy in the world. So it looked interesting, but it ended up with him with a broken nose and being unconscious on the cage. So,
Jonah, we have Renat.
Yeah. Good luck pronouncing that one.
Renat Fakhretdinov against Nicholas Dalby. Now, I want to say, Dalby beat our boy Gabriel Bonfim.
Yeah, I know you were disappointed.
Impressively and convincingly. And he also lost to Tim Means in 2021, which, let me say, both Nico Price and Alex Morano have wins over Tim Means. So I don't know how to judge this thing. I'm trying to restrict my language, but I have no clue. He looked like a god beater relatively to his past performance, Bonfim, and he's lost to Tim Means.
I think it's Renat clearly here. First of all, Renat's 22-1, I think. It's either 21-1 or 22.
22-1-1.
That's a serious fucking record. And the fight.
Is it though?
The fight he lost.
Bonfim was 16-0 before he fought.
The fight Renat lost was in like 2011 too. Like, he lost the second fight of his career. He hasn't lost in a really long time. And Dalby, I think that Bonfim's younger than us. Like, I think it was just a case of gassing out and looking like a fool against a veteran. Not to disrespect Dalby, but like, I think the loss to Tim Means is more representative than his win against Bonfim, and I would expect Renat's a really good striker. I'd expect Renat to just beat him up for 3 rounds probably.
Renat's flirted with welterweight contention. He's been 14 or 15.
Yeah, he's been ranked.
Times.
He's been ranked. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't fight often enough or top-level competition enough to get up there, but this should probably give him like a Magny fight next or something along those lines.
Yeah. My pick is I just couldn't care less.
Yeah, it's not a bad pick. I'd probably go with Renat, but yours isn't bad either.
All right, that is UFC Fight Night Riyadh. Way to go! Looking forward. So last week we recapped what was going on with 303 and UFC 303, and specifically who could replace Conor in case that he was injured. Now that kind of tempest has dimmed and then come all the way back, and so now we're worried about 303 all over again. We had a Yuri conversation where Yuri was talking to a local reporter, I think, over in Czech Republic, and he was saying, Yuri, there's some speculation that you're going to replace Conor, to which Yuri replied, nice speculation. Now, that is a typically Yuri quote.
Yeah.
That being said, what are the chances you think that the light heavyweight title replaces 303?
I think more likely than not. I don't think.
Really? You think it's over 50%?
I think more likely than not. And I think it could literally come like any minute now as we're recording this, because I just don't see any other option on the table. And Yuri and Alex are game, and they will accept a fat bag of money, and they're both able to make weight relatively easily compared to other champions and top contenders in their divisions. So I don't see what the path out of it is if it's not Yuri Pereira. It's the only option. I say it's more likely than not almost by default, because there's no other option. Especially when the Conor Chandler fight was supposed to happen at 170. It just, finding a replacement for that is pointless at this point.
Crucially, is Chandler going to approve a 70? That's it, right?
Yeah,
is Chandler going to say, I'll fight?
He trains with half of them at Killcliff anyways. And there's no fight that even does anything for it. He's a 55er, regardless of what his next fight is. So
if you're going to say yes to Shavy, no fucking shot.
Right.
Shavkat Rakhmonov, for the listeners.
Shav trains at Killcliff too. Those guys aren't going to fight each other unless titles are on the line. So
right. That's our quick looking forward. We have the bonus round this week, which is I'm really looking forward to. It is about fighters that are most likely to hold the belt a year from today. These are fighters that aren't already holding the belt. Now, I've done some good work on this. I'm about to smoke Jonah. This is going to be an easy piece. I'm very excited. I've done some groundwork. And we're going to do a draft. So,
okay.
Jonah, heads or tails?
Let's do heads.
Heads. People say tails never fails. It is heads.
Cool. So I get first pick?
You have the first pick. So for everyone listening, we're going to do 2 4-man teams of people most likely to hold the belt in a year that aren't already holding the belt. And Jonah's got the first pick.
And you have the second and third pick?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're on Snake, of course.
So I got 4 and 5 then. Okay.
I already got my list, dude. You're so fucked.
Okay. And just so I understand the timeline, are we doing by mid-2025?
June 2025.
Yeah. June 2025. Okay. So
June 1st, 2025. Now, Jonah's a little bit of a misogynist. He doesn't include women's belts, but women's belts are...
Stop. If that's the case, if women are included, it would be foolish of me not to pick Kayla Harrison.
Well, Is that your first pick?
Kayla Harrison's my first pick.
Ah, damn it.
100%.
Damn it. I had Kayla at 86%.
100%.
I said she could lose and get another title shot before June 2025.
No, obviously, Kayla Harrison.
That is an obvious first pick. Yeah. Beautiful by Jonah.
Who you got with 2 and 3? Because my number 1 is way better than any pick you're going to make here.
All right. Well, I had Kayla at 86%. I couldn't believe I shouldn't have said anything about the women.
Yeah, right.
But Tom Aspinall is my number 2 pick. I have him at a 75% chance.
Hold on now. He's got the interim. Does that not count as a belt?
No.
Interesting. Okay.
No.
I would still pick Kayla, so it doesn't change my mind. But...
Yeah, no, I would still pick Kayla if I were you too.
Okay.
I would pick Aspinall. I have him 55%. Jones retires, and then an extra 20% that he beats Jones. That is, I give him a 48% chance of beating Jones for the math on that.
I'd double that.
I know you would.
Disrespect.
My number 3 pick is Magomed Ankalaev.
Yeah, that one hurts.
70% chance of being the champ.
That hurts.
It really doesn't matter who he fights next. If we're talking in a year's time, this guy is going to. Look, there's nothing that Jonah and I agree more on than Magomed Ankalaev.
It hurts that he's not on my team. It legitimately hurts.
Was that your number 1?
Of course it was, yeah.
All right. Well, I'll tell you, because let me walk you through my mindset. He can even sit another Pereira fight. He can even sit another Pereira fight and be the next one.
Next fight's probably the title. Even if
it's almost a bonus that his next fight is not the title because he'll get there. Yeah, by June 2025. Yeah.
Agree. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
All right. So I got 2 in a row here.
Yeah, you do.
So my second pick, I'm gonna go with another chick, Valentina.
Don't say the one.
I think Valentina is gonna beat Grasso in their next fight, and that might be the only fight that happens in that division for that belt. But even if it's not, and she has to fight any other contenders, I'd take Valentina. So I think Valentina's pretty safe.
Well, you got lucky in that Valentina won the last fight.
Right.
Yeah.
And Valentina was winning the first fight anyways. I think Valentina's a pretty safe bet there. And for my third pick, this is a tad bias, but objectively, I still think he's one of the best fighters.
Oh, you're so cooked. It's a featherweight champion. Alex
Volkanovski is my
pick. You're so cooked.
No. I think he gets it. I think he's going to win that fight.
Well, I'll tell you what. I thought about this extraneously, much more than I should have. Much more than some others did, I would argue. And the thing with Volk is he's getting his next fight is a title fight.
And it'll only fight one time before June of next year, most likely. And it'll be that title shot.
So it is his chances for that fight.
Yeah, right.
Correct.
And so, I mean, you're talking about either probably fighting Ilya, but maybe fighting Max. I think I like my chances there. I think that's a pretty good pick.
I have Max at 28%.
Yeah, Max isn't bad
because no. I don't think he's a good pick at all because best case he beats.
Yeah, but he's alive, and he has to fight in both divisions. He could win another fight at 55 and contend there too. Because Islam's not going to have fights soon.
Someone you missed. Women's division.
Who you got?
Tatiana Suarez.
Yeah, she just never fights, man.
Yeah, because she's not healthy. I said 65% if healthy.
Yeah.
45% as it is.
Right.
But somewhere in between there. I mean, she beats Wiley. She beats anybody when it comes to it, it's just if she can stay healthy.
Agree.
So I actually don't mind. Yeah, I'm taking her.
Yeah. Okay.
Taking her. Yeah.
You love Tatiana, so she belongs.
I do love Tatiana. She's like the fourth favorite fighter, probably. Yeah. She's on the Mount Rushmore. Now, someone that I'm kind of surprised wasn't taken by you, Merab Dvalishvili.
Yeah, it's fair.
Yeah.
Fair.
I gave him a 55% chance of beating Sean.
Yeah.
And then I don't know that he fights again before that, but if he does, I'll take whoever he's got.
So contrary to your pick, your final pick there, that was your fourth pick.
Yep.
I'm gonna take Umar Nurmagomedov. And you know what's sad is that would mean that both Sean and Corey would lose if we're right.
But you might have this to reference.
Yeah, at least we'll have this to reference for silver lining if
that would be
Umar
disgusting
and Merab
if it happens.
Yeah. So I would take Umar over Merab.
Straight up.
I think I think you gave me.
You take Umar over Merab straight up.
I think you
Merab
gave me
fighting for the title.
I think you gave me a pass taking Merab over Umar there.
You're really Merab fighting for the title, Umar fighting for the Morgan.
By June next year, yeah, I think so. I think we'll probably see Merab Umar, and I think Umar will probably beat his ass.
Who are you for?
Valentina, Kayla, Volkanovski.
By the way, I
Umar.
love that you had Kayla first. I love that you had Kayla first. She's the definitive number one answer.
100%. 100%. Never been so sure about anything.
Kayla, Valentina,
Volk,
Umar,
and Volk.
All right. Do you want to hear my other answers?
Other answers?
My other answers that didn't get picked.
Okay, yeah. Who you got? Got to be some middleweights in there, right?
No. Sean Strickland, 45%, assuming he's next after Izzy, Rob Khamzat, and does not have to fight again.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if he doesn't have to fight again, then yeah, that's a good spot. Manon Fayor.
Yeah, I thought
she would be higher, but does she need another fight before a title opportunity?
No, because she beat the shit out of Erin Blanchfield. She's getting one next.
Well, she beat the daylights out of Rose. That's as high profile as it gets.
She's gonna. There's no option for her but to fight for the title next. Like at that point, they're just eliminating every matchup. Fiora's good, dude. Fiora's really good.
No, she's really good. She beat the shit out of Rose.
Yeah, I know it's not like the most exciting fight style. Like she's kind of just like a point fighter that's going to win decisions every time, but like I don't see how she could get beat, honestly. She embarrassed Blanchfield.
Don't say that.
She did. I know that's your girl, but she did.
I'm going to marry her. Shavkat, 40%.
Yeah.
I don't know if Islam is next after Bilal or if Shavkat.
By June next year, that's kind of tough to say if Islam would get it in.
Might be a double. Yeah. Might be a double. Mukayev, just because he's about to have a title shot.
Man, I'm low on Mukayev as opposed to...
No, me too. He hasn't done his thing. I watched him in London get his knee popped.
Yeah, right.
Right? Remember?
Yeah. I think Manel Kopp's probably going to beat his ass. If in the
you and your whole team.
Nah, in the miracle that Manel Kopp can make weight. Manel Kopp's probably going to step on the scale 12 pounds over at flyweight.
You know what's hilarious is that Manel Kopp can't make weight, and he's like 5'6", bro.
Yeah,
like,
I know.
He's just drinking.
He's not even close to making weight. Like, he's going to have to go up to bantamweight after he misses weight this time.
I told this to J-Man off screen, but Manel Kopp's done nothing fight-wise to gain my attention. I just love him calling out the CBK boys in New Zealand. That was enough to get me on his team.
They need Kai to win his next fight, and they need Manel to get the belt so we can see that matchup. That's like the only way flyweight can be entertaining at this point.
Yeah. All right. I got Corey Corey, I think, is in the toughest spot. I gave him a 30% chance.
Man, that's high.
Well, I gave him 52. It didn't work out.
That would imply like a parlayed win for Corey over Umar and Merab.
Yeah, correct.
That's difficult.
I gave him 52% against Umar, but then it's also 52% against Merab.
Okay.
So that's terrible. I gave Bilal an 8%. I'm not gonna talk more about that.
Yeah.
Max 28, just because he would have to do Topuria and Volk.
Yeah.
Back to back, and then I said no middleweights, a little bit of a cluster.
Yeah.
And I said no lightweight because Armand's a bad bet because he's probably gonna lose. Honestly, that was the issue. Armand's a bad bet because he's probably gonna lose, and then Islam moves up.
Right.
I even like Charles a little bit better than Armand. So that's that.
What about Izzy? No Izzy love? I think Izzy's going to beat Drickus in a couple months. So then we're looking at defending maybe once within a year. No Khamzat love?
I don't think I could manifest any. Yeah, Khamzat maybe. But my thing with the middleweights, though, was that there's just so many of them.
Sure.
That you talking percentage-wise, it's tough to say. Actually, that's why I had Strickland 1, because I assume he doesn't fight again.
Yeah.
He doesn't fight again until he gets the shot. Like, if you're really doing June 1, 2025, I think it's tough to say any other middleweight than Strickland, just because Strickland can wait out until he has a title there.
That's fair.